What is up, everyone? We appreciate you guys taking the chance to give us another listen here in the Bert and TD podcast. Only this time, TD is not with us. TD's got some stuff going on that he was unable to join us. So I am joined by, once again, one of my best fraternity brothers here, Adrian Fedque. Adrian, my man, appreciate you joining us again.
Absolutely. And this is going to be a lot of fun because we're going to be talking about our alma mater, Temple University. Yeah.
Yeah, guys, this show is completely dedicated to a Temple one. So this episode you're going to listen to is only Temple related. I appreciate you guys listening in because this is something that impacts both Adrian and I. Guys, if you maybe do or don't know, Temple recently finally put the proposal for the stadium out, for a football stadium. This is not something that really should surprise you if you're a Temple alum because you've known that this day was coming. So what we're going to do here, guys, is I'm going to kind of go through a couple pages at a time. I'm going to go through some of these highlighted notes I have from Temple's proposal, and what I'll make sure I'll do, guys, is I'll tweet it out on our Bert and TD Twitter account. I'll make sure I reshare it. Adrian, please make sure you reshare it so you guys can all read this article as well. But what we're going to do is we're going to go through it. I'm going to give you some of the high-level notes. Adrian hasn't had the opportunity to read it yet, so Adrian's going to hear it for the first time, similar to what some of you viewers are, and that way you guys can all have that knee-jerk reaction. And then I'll turn around and I'll say, okay, here's kind of my thoughts after I've had a couple days to research this, digest this, and then we'll kind of talk at the end if me and Adrian are pro stadium or against stadium. Adrian, you ready to roll, brother?
Oh, yeah, baby.
All right, let's do it. So, guys, let's kind of talk about the framework here. And the openings area of this document is talking about the why. So why does this need to happen? So Temple University, as you guys may or may not know, opened in 1894. And 10 years after the university was opened, it opened a football program. However, there's never been a stadium on campus at Temple University, which I actually did not know. Thought that was pretty interesting. But the area proposed for the stadium is on Broad Street on the east side of Norris and 16th Street, west of Pearson McGonigal Halls by the Amtrak Star Station. Okay, this is already in Temple's existing footprint. So Temple already owns this land. It's not that it's owned by the city or anyone else. Ultimately, the stadium will be a 35,000-seat stadium with the total cost of being $130 million. Financial planning is already in the works with a $50 million fundraising goal. And the project funding is come primarily from private donors, bonds, later supported by funds that would otherwise be paid in rents to Lincoln Financial Field. To put you guys this in perspective for you guys, let's talk about the link and what we're paying there. So Temple has played at the link since 2003. Temple has been paying an annual, if it wasn't disclosed in this article, but I did find it someone else, annually Temple has been paying about $1 million a year to rent the link. Now, to put this into perspective here, guys, too, Temple receives a portion of ticket sales and concession revenue. So when you guys are down at the link buying beers, buying hot dogs, buying burgers, Temple's not seeing all that money. The Eagles are getting a lot of that money, not Temple University. Ultimately, the stadium, what it's going to have is obviously 35,000-seat stadium. To put this in comparison, the link has about 70. So this would truly be half of the size. It also will have classrooms, research labs, and meeting rooms on inside the building. So, Adrian, before we kind of get into the nitty-gritty here, what's kind of your knee-jerk reaction here in some of these numbers I've shared with you?
Yeah, immediately the thought that comes to mind is this has been a long time coming. And when I started at Temple back in 2006, this was a 1-11 football team. The first year that Al Golden came over here. And that was the start of, I guess, the golden age of Temple football. And they've really made those huge strides since. So you go from 1-11, then you go to 4-8. And then in 2008, they go to 5-7, and then 2009, they finally make that big jump. They go to 9-4. They beat, actually they did not beat. They lost to UCLA in the Eagle Bank Bowl, but that was their first bowl appearance since the 1979 Garden State Bowl. So you can just see right there how long it took to resurrect this program. 1979, fast forward to 2009. So Al Golden was the one who started the transformation. And then you had Adazio come in, and they won a bowl game, I believe, correct? What was that bowl called? Do
That
you
was
remember that?
if I remember correctly, I want to say it's the Idaho Potato Bowl, where I believe they beat Wyoming, if my memory serves me.
They beat Wyoming. It was the New Mexico Bowl. That's what it was, because they won that vase. They won the vase. And I was just so proud that they won a goddamn bowl game. It was awesome. And to see this program grow into what it is now, because you remember a couple years ago when they played Notre Dame, that was the peak, and they almost won that game. So it's just, I'm really proud of how far this program has come. And, you know, this stadium, it started back in 2006 with Al Golden. That's how long this has kind of taken.
Absolutely right, Adrian. And let's not forget, let's be fair. Temple, I believe, is still the losingest FBS college football program in the entire country. So we are not Alabama here by any margins. That said, let me give you why this is important to Temple, and it kind of puts this all in perspective. Adrian, you did a great job outlining there the rise in Temple football. Temple a couple years ago hosted game day, and when they had Notre Dame come into town, let me kind of put these numbers in perspective, guys. For Temple University to fund game day, you know, to pay for the venue space and pay for some of the additional costs, it cost Temple about $5,000 to host college game day. In return, just game day alone, game day had 2 million viewers on game day. And to get 2 million viewers to Temple University, that would have cost the Temple University $5 million for them to get that. Okay? Now, you can go back and forth, but I think we all will agree that when it comes to athletics is going to market your university to a whole new level than you can by putting up billboards or making commercials on TV or anything like that. Because of that, we have seen a 16% increase in applications. On average now, we're seeing 37,000 people apply to Temple University. Only about 5% of that, only 5,000, are actually enrolling. That's a typical average freshman GPA is a 3.6, 27 ACT, 1,200 SAT. Adrian, not to get too personal, but would you have gotten in if you applied to Temple today?
Maybe not.
I mean, I know for a fact I would not have gotten into Temple today. And that's honestly like a really prideful thing for me to say, you know, that my university has gotten better. And you can't say that it's not because of athletics. And to put this in perspective, guys, in 11 games in the last 3 years, Temple has had a total viewership of 25 million viewers in 11 of the last 39 games. So the digital landscape of what Temple is getting because of athletics is through the roof. But let me continue on here with some of the other highlights I pulled from this interesting document Temple pushed out. The average capacity of a American conference, which is the conference that Temple plays in. For those of you who don't know, hey, Temple plays in the American Conference. It's kind of like the land of the misfit toys. It's all throughout the country. But we're in the American Conference. The average capacity for a home game in the American is about 45,000. As I mentioned, the Link has about 70,000 seats, and Temple usually brings in about 37,000. Okay. Important to note here, guys, that Temple's big selling line here, and I think this is a good line to use. Temple is saying there's too much supply, which in turn limits the ability to drive ticket sales and result in a game day revenue and experience. I think that's a very fair line, Adrian. Would you agree with?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, let me kind of use some other interesting things that this article comes out with. Tulane University down in New Orleans, also another school in the American Conference, in a similar situation. A couple years ago, they were playing in the Superdome, which is where the New Orleans Saints play. That's a 73,000 seat stadium. They moved down a reduction of 43,000 seats to their new stadium, which in turn has increased average attendance by 5,000 tickets sold. So Tulane is being an example here of when Tulane moved down to their own stadium, they actually sold 5,000 more tickets. So that's obviously important because this is not tickets sold, this is attendance. So this is butts in seats. This is not, hey, we sold a ticket but no one showed up. No, this is people walking in, sitting down. Why does that matter? Yeah, I know it doesn't matter if they bought a ticket or not. You got the money. It matters for concessions because that's the way you're getting additional revenue. Some other interesting information in this article here. The average recently built FBS Division college football stadium is 37,000. Temple is proposing 35,000. So they are saying, hey, we understand it's going to be lower. This is a really interesting stat here, but I want to pause after I read this. 95% of Temple's football games over the past 10 years could have been accommodated in a 35,000 seat stadium. Adrian, when I read that line to you, your knee-jerk reaction was what?
That's crazy to me because I remember back in 2006, again, when I was a freshman at Temple, I could show up at halftime and sit at the 50, about 5 rows up from the stadium. That's how low the attendance used to be. That's the doldrums that Temple football used to be. And, that's crazy to me, all that attendance, because think about the Temple student and what they have to do to get to the game. You have to take the subway. You got to pay money for the subway. It's about, 15, 20-minute ride, you'd say, Brendan? About
Probably
that?
more than that, yeah.
Yeah. So you got to get down there and all that. So it's a process to get there. That amazes me that they've been able to average that amount. That's pretty cool.
It's interesting to me. And now the thing that I always want to know, too, is this stat obviously lies a little bit because, if you really dive into the numbers, almost every year Temple is either hosting a big-time program, whether it's Penn State or Notre Dame.
That's true.
So you look at that average right there, one game you're going to get 70,000, and then you can have a game of, 20,000, but the average is still going to kick up. Anyway, a couple more lines in here, and I want to keep getting to, guys. 80% of the football programs playing in the recently built FBS programs are playing in a fuller stadium by the right size capacity to the demand. So what that statement is saying, guys, is it is saying because these schools have moved down to smaller stadiums, 80% of these football programs have seen an increase in their capacity as far as attendance. So that's a big selling point right there, okay? A couple other lines I want to get to in here. Main campus celebration zones. Let's call it what it is. This is tailgating. The idea for tailgating, and this has always been a concern here, is if you have a stadium on campus, well, where are you going to tailgate? Well, there are a lot of universities. I will use the University of Georgia, big-time SEC program in Athens, Ohio. They actually tailgate on campus. So what the University of Georgia does, because their stadium is in the middle of their campus, is the business school, for example, will lease out lots or little venue spaces in front of the business building to different alumni. So the alumni will pay a premium to tailgate and bring their grills and put them there to allow them to tailgate on campus. So this is a great additional way for the university to produce some revenue. The trade-off, for those of you who haven't been to Temple's campus, it's not very large. So while on the surface this sounds like a good idea, personally for me, Adrian, I'm a little skeptical. Do you have a problem with the idea of tailgating on campus, or are you all for it?
Yeah, I don't know where they're going to go. That like you were saying is there isn't a lot of room. There's a lot of things on Temple's campus. That's why there's not a lot of room. It's just there's a lot of things in a confined space, I guess. So, I don't know where you're going to tailgate, but whatever. I would love to have this stadium on campus, though. So, I guess there's a trade-off.
There is, and this gets to the biggest trade-off, the community. So before I read you guys this section, I want to give you kind of a quick history background on Temple University for those of you who don't know. Temple University was founded as a night school in the Temple Baptist Church, which is why we are Temple, and is also why we're the Owls, because we were a night school that was designed for inner city people who maybe didn't have the resources and worked full-time jobs during the day but still want to get an education. So Temple is very much a blue collar, so much so that there is an expression of diamonds in the rough to describe the Temple student members. So the community is something that Temple was very much originally built for, but the community also is slowly starting to get pushed out because as the growth of Temple students grows, which is good for the university, there's not as much, space around it for the community. So let me kind of read to you guys some of the big community standing points that they made in this article. They made a point that 15,000 students now live on or around campus, which is incredible if you talk to someone who's in their 40s, that there's 15,000 people who live on campus at Temple. Some of the things they talked about as concerns, were obvious, were, hey, we're worried about public intoxication, we're worried about, drunken disorderlies, et cetera, et cetera. So the way that Temple fought these concerns in this section here was they mentioned including higher fines, and they said they're going to increase security presence and have a double security presence on game day. Adrian, let me frame it to you this way. This is all well and good, but let's be real here. Adrian, I never met a single person when we were in college that got an underage, a drunken disorderly, an open container. And let me put it to you this way. It's not because that wasn't happening at Temple. So to me, Adrian, I think this is a bunch of bull. I have a hard time believing that Temple actually would crack down on it because they've never done it before. How am I supposed to believe the university is going to crack down on open container and drunken disorderly and intoxication, et cetera?
Yeah, that's a good point there. And to make a point even on the community thing, and you talked about a 40-year-old and what they'd see at Temple now. Well, think about even us graduating maybe 7-8 years ago now, and to go back to Temple and just to see all the new buildings. You got new apartment buildings. They're just constantly adding to the campus, and it is pushing a lot of the neighbors out. Even because I remember I used to live, because if you live in a house at Temple, I used to live on Diamond Street. Is it? God, I'm like blanking already. It wasn't Diamond Street. It was right behind Whitehall, and I'm blanking what the street was. But we had neighbors, that were community folk, and they eventually basically got kicked out in a way. Like they got money to get kicked out essentially, and we're seeing a lot more of that. So people that have had their homes for a long time, they're actually like getting the boot. So that's the thing. Here. Are we going to be seeing more and more people lose their homes because of this and have to move and shit?
And that's kind of like the catch-22, because if you look at the surface, it says no, because Temple already owns this land. So in theory, the land they're doing construction on is still Temple's property. However, we know as Temple grows, it's got nowhere else to go. So unfortunately, what we see happen is we see those landlords are starting to up the rent rate for those locals, and the people who grew up in those communities maybe can no longer afford that.
Yeah, so, that's true. Yeah,
they're getting pushed out, and that makes a big rift.
Yeah, no, you're right. Because I would have those neighbors; they'd complain all the time about it.
And I can't completely blame them. I mean, they're absolutely in the right that John Doe from Scranton, Pennsylvania, comes to live off campus for 2 years, and he wants to live close to campus, and he knows that, hey, I can pay a lot more money. So what happens, the landlord says, I can charge more for someone who only lives here for 1 year, take their security deposit, because we all know every landlord's got to take your security deposit in the end. So it's a tough situation because the community is very much starting to view Temple as people who are taking their land. Yeah.
No, you're spot on there.
The other interesting thing in this community section here, it talks about the fact that the stadium is going to be height adjusted to ensure that light and then also noise stays down into the stadium and does not spill out into the community. I believe that. Stadiums today are designed to keep noise down. I mean, that's the point. You want a noisy home atmosphere, so I totally buy that. The other thing that this talks about is the fact that the community eventually will be able to use this facility, and that's where I'm curious what that will be. They didn't really do a great job explaining what the community eventually will be able to do. They said that, they would eventually be able to use the community for local high school games and things like that, and that's all well and good. But it still left on this article a lot unsaid. And what I thought was really disappointing to me as a reader of this section was the shortest section in here was about the community. And that's a problem for me because I think the biggest issue with the stadium is the community. So maybe it's a subtle thing and maybe I'm overreacting and I'll admit that. But I didn't love the fact that the community section was pretty short.
Yeah, and like I just said, it just the first thing that came to mind was my neighbors and who I used to live next to, and they were really, really nice people, elderly people, and I'm talking they have like 10 people living in the house. It's not like the college atmosphere where you might stick like 6 people in a house, have 6 different rooms, but some of these people they just don't have the money. And you have the grandmother, you have the mother, you have the children, and then, maybe even a couple kids too. So they really just pack it into those little homes. And, that is a little bothersome to see that you're saying, like the community section is that small. Seems like they don't care at all.
Yeah, here's the thing. I'm a glasses half full person. But it's hard for me to sell it, when you're not putting a lot in there. Let's kind of move on to transportation because this is another big section in here. So obviously, since it's going to be right off Broad Street, you're obviously going to have easy access for SEPTA. There's obviously, 2 different subway lines there. So that makes it really easy as far as public transit to get into. Not a problem there. But parking. Parking is the issue here. Now, Temple has said that they have identified more than 32,000 parking spots and easy walking access to where the stadium is. I thought about that number, and I'm calling BS on it. And I'm saying that because you might have 32,000 parking spots, sure, but you have to remember here that students live here full time. And Adrian, you know what it was like. If you didn't have to move your car, you weren't going to do it. So those parking spots aren't going to be available on Saturdays the way they think they are. Yeah,
and how many cars can you fit in that little parking garage? You're not going to be fitting 32,000 people in there.
Nope. And that's what they mentioned here. They said that spaces would be more than additional to about 5,000 that would be in adjacent lots and things like that. So there's 37,000 parking spots. My assumption is that's including the parking structure down at Lear Core Center.
Yeah.
But, still, that's really not nearly enough. Now, obviously, if you're bringing in alum who live in the city, yeah, they're absolutely going to take the subway up and you're good to go. But you get people who are, alumni, and this is an issue I have here because you're saying here, you're talking out of both sides of your mouth because the university is saying, hey, we want to have a stadium where alumni can come back and come to a game, but where are they going to park?
Yeah. Yeah, so, I've got no idea because – we know how it was back when we lived there. You can literally drive around for a couple minutes, like 5-10 minutes, trying to look for a spot. So them to say 32,000 people, 32,000 parking spots, that's ridiculous.
Here's the quick summary here. Parking sucked when we were in college, Adrian, and there was a stadium on campus.
Yeah.
Why am I supposed to believe now that parking's better?
We just don't buy the BS. That's all.
Yeah, not buying what you're selling here, guys. But exactly. let's kind of move on to a little more of the specifics about the stadium itself. So other things that mentioned, it's going to have 28,000 square feet of retail center. I'd imagine that'd be very similar to having like an Under Armour store in there, probably some food and beverage options, things like that. Makes total sense. As I mentioned, it's going to include a classroom center, a research space, especially heavy on concussion prevention and testing. Makes a ton of sense. And then, of course, as I mentioned, they're going to have additional places for breakout rooms, suites, potentially a Temple Football Hall of Fame, which I imagine is going to be a very small room, and probably some additional tailgate venues. So that's kind of the quick article here. Guys, I strongly encourage you to give this a read. It's only 6 pages long. It's pretty interesting stuff. Overall, Adrian, what do we think? I know we're alum and we're obviously sport people, but we also are people of the community and know the history of Temple University being a community-first university. Adrian, which way are you leaning, pro stadium, against stadium?
Oh, I'm definitely pro stadium. I've been waiting for a long time to have Temple have their own stadium. And when you think about even the 35,000 people, that is the perfect capacity for the stadium, because when you think about Lincoln Financial Field and, a lot of the games, a lot of empty seats, and you don't want to see that. And when you have it filled, that's how you keep the noise in there. So I think the atmosphere would be a lot better. It's easier for the students to get there. I mean, I would have loved to have my own stadium. My God, I skipped out on so many games because I was hungover and I just didn't feel like taking the subway to watch
absolutely.
Carolina or whoever the hell we played. We used to be in the MAC back then. So I wasn't going to go down to the stadium at 12 o'clock when I was maybe still inebriated from the night before to go watch Temple play Northern Illinois. I just didn't care. So this is to have it on campus. If I'm inebriated, I would go walk and still go to the stadium. But I'm not taking a subway to go there.
Yeah, I'm with you. That was, I can't tell you how many times I simply said, I don't want to go to the Temple game, not because I don't want to go to the game, but because I don't want to take 25 minutes of public transportation.
Yep, exactly. When I could just maybe watch it on TV.
Exactly. Most of our games were televised. It was a 25-minute commute. It really – and you can tell me up and down, oh, yeah, but we can tailgate. Yeah, no, I couldn't tailgate as a college kid. I didn't have a car. You know what I'm not doing? Putting my grill on the subway and riding it down.
Yeah.
You can tell me all that. So the Link, it sucked. I mean, I really hated going to games at the Link for Temple. For Eagles games, they're great. Temple games, man, it's just it looked like when you were a kid and you put on your dad's shoes and they were size 19 and you were like a child's 2. That was what it felt like being a Temple fan at Lincoln Financial Field.
And the other thing, too, it's silly to have a Temple game and then to have the Eagles logo at midfield. I know it's like a little subtle thing, but I like the fact that now when you watch a Temple game, you get to see the end zones painted in Temple cherry and white. You'll have the logo at midfield. Just the whole look of that. I'm all about that.
I am also pro stadium, and I am pro stadium because of the financial reasoning. I mean, having $1 million a year essentially set on fire just to go to the Link and not essentially get the home field environment that you want, that's not awesome. I also think about it from the marketing standpoint. We watch games and you see that Temple commercial, and sometimes they're really awesome, like those Temple-made ones we had back in the day, and even the ones out now are pretty sweet. And those are awesome. But then the next thing they show you is a flyover the Eagle Stadium, and it's like, oh, okay, cool. Now, I'm an alum. I know what my campus looks like. But I'm thinking about the 15-year-old who's growing up outside of Pittsburgh and thinking, hey, I've never been to Philly. I'm curious about this school, Temple, and I know it's one of the biggest public schools in my state, but I've never been there. I think you're just missing such opportunities. So I am pro stadium because I think it offers such great benefits to the university's growth. I mean, we've seen the university academics growth over the last several years, and the only thing that's changed in the last several years, the football team's gotten good, it's gotten more media attention, and in turn, you get better students because of it. So I'm totally pro, stadium. The only thing that I'm kind of circling and starring, you got to do something for the community, whether it's a wellness center, whether it's adding a daycare, you got to add something in for that community, because the community relationship wasn't good when Adrian and I were there, and it won't be better when you put 35,000 people there every Saturday.
Yeah, it's going to be worse for sure. Again, going back to the neighbors, I mean, I couldn't tell you how many times they would complain about the university. You would just sit there and have a chat with the grandmother, and, she would really run it down, and she'd open up your eyes, So definitely agree with you there. The only argument I would say for going to the Link is, getting to see the stadium and to see where the Eagles play. That's like the only thing, because I thought it was cool in the beginning, like the first time I'd go or the second time I'd go, and like getting to be able to sit at the 50-yard line 5 rows up. I think it's pretty cool, but that goes away pretty fast too. So just want to say that.
No, I'm with you. It definitely wears out its welcome. And then and then the other fact too that Temple's not getting the concession money. So it's like
Yeah.
essentially we are not getting any revenue that you normally would get, which sucks. The only thing, if you're really biased, I assume that when Temple goes and plays a home game, I believe the American Conference has a no alcohol sales in an American Conference stadium. So you probably won't be able to buy a beer at the Temple game. But you know what? That you just saved yourself $12 on a Miller
Yeah.
Lite.
Yeah, who the hell goes to a football game to buy beer for $12? That's why you tailgate and you get drunk beforehand.
Right. Either way, I am pro. I think there's going to be a lot of opposition for it, and understandably so. But I think inevitably this will get pushed through.
I agree. Absolutely.
All right, let's switch to the other sport. So, Adrian, when you and I were applying to Temple University, I think a lot of people in our high schools respectively kind of said, they still have a football team? Everyone knows them for basketball. Temple is one of the winningest college basketball programs in the entire country's history. And we got to talk here about Coach Fran Dunphy. When we think about Temple University basketball, there's really only two coaches that you think about, which is pretty impressive to say for such a team with such a long history. But that history is starting to turn from winning into being 500 at best. Adrian, it's time for us to ask the question, is it time for Coach Dunphy to go?
Yeah, we're definitely reaching that point. And Dunphy came in, I believe, when I was a sophomore. Obviously went the transition from John Chaney to Fran Dunphy. My thing with Dunphy is I feel like the game is, I don't want to say it's past him, but it's he's got to get with the current times. He's got definitely an old school philosophy of how he approaches the game, and I don't like the whole one and Dunphy thing in the NCAA tournament when they actually make it. He is so conservative in these games, especially when they have a lead with like 5 minutes left. He just stalls on the ball, doesn't shoot the ball till there's like 5 on the shot clock, and he doesn't play to win. He plays to lose. And now we're seeing a season here where the Owls are 10-10. They just got just got destroyed tonight by Cincinnati. It was like 75-43. I think it's time. And I didn't think I'd say that 5 years ago, but I think it's time to move on.
It's tough because, you never want to say the grass is greener on the other side, right? I mean, when you look at Coach Dunphy here, he had a string from 2006 until 2013 where every single year he had a 20-win team, which is very impressive. And then he had a year off in 2013 where they only won 9. And then in 14 and 15, he won 20 games there. So you ask most, fans in the country, hey, are you okay with a 20-win team? Most fans in the country, unless you're from Big Blue Nation in Kentucky, is going to say, yeah, give me the 20 wins. We'll deal with, the first round losses. But it's gotten to the point now that Temple has just slowly started to plateau, 16-16 in 2016, and obviously now another 500 seasons so far. It's looking like, and I hate to say this because I never want to. I think it's such a disappointing thing to say about a team, but I really thought that tonight watching this game, Temple players quit. I mean, they played Cincinnati tooth and nail the first time they played them, and they got dump trucked by Cincinnati tonight. And those are the little things you look at, and I'm like, this team might be quitting.
They beat Clemson earlier this year. They beat Wisconsin earlier this year. There was another team. What was that?
Auburn.
Yeah. I mean, they beat a couple good teams, and I don't know what happened. And the same thing happened last year, too. They beat Florida State in that preseason NIT. They won that, and then they just went straight downhill. So, the other question here, though, is, all right, if you fire Fran Dunphy, who do you bring in, and who can you bring in?
Aaron McKee. I mean, there's no question that's why Aaron McKee was brought on to be the assistant. I don't think there's any way Aaron McKee took that job without the understanding of you're the coach in waiting personally.
Yeah. No, you're right. I blanked there. That's a good call.
No, and Coach Dunphy's contract runs through the 2018 season. So I go back and forth with this because I think he has earned the right to essentially run out his contract. I think that's a fair thing to say because it's 2018. He can say, yeah, we're okay with letting you run the contract out and not giving you the boot. If it was a 2020 conversation, I think that's when you sit down with him and you say, hey, why don't you resign and we leave on good terms, because we don't want to have to fire you. But unfortunately, you're at that spot because here's the thing. When we were in the American 10 conference, you weren't playing Atlantic 10, excuse me. When you're in the Atlantic 10, you had a couple teams that were pretty darn good, but you didn't have the same teams that you have now in the American. You have powerhouse programs like in Cincinnati. SMU is a pretty darn good program. Houston, pretty darn good program. Memphis, yeah, they're down a little bit, but that's historically a good team as well. Wichita State, which is a very good program here in the last couple of years. Connecticut, which is a national powerhouse, typically year in and year out. And you can't get by coaching not to lose and by very much running a older type of game saying, hey, let's just win games in the 60s. No, you can't sell that on a recruit. Recruits now want to play up and down. They want to score in the 80s, and that's never been the type of game that Coach Dunphy has brought here to Temple.
Yeah, and that's why I think the program has gone downhill. It's the times have changed, the game has changed. And Fran Dunphy is kind of stuck in the 80s and 90s. And I think that's part of the reason why there's been a drop-off the last couple years. I mean, they're 2-6 in the American right now. And you're right about the competition getting better because what the Atlantic 10 was, you had the teams at the top, but then you had a bunch of bad teams at the bottom, like your Fordhams, like your St. Bonaventures, your Richmonds. So your Duquesnes. I mean, Duquesne beat up on them every year.
Yeah.
So it was a lot easier in the Atlantic 10 for sure. I think Aaron McKee. I think that's the way to go. I mean, even to think if he's trying to recruit kids and he just flashes that NBA background. I played with Allen Iverson. I think kids would want to come here.
Yeah, I mean, look, we are in arguably the greatest city in the country for high school basketball, and Temple struggles to keep recruits home.
Yeah.
Now, I go back and forth on this because, the easy response is, hey, how can you not get a kid who lives 15 minutes from campus? How can you not recruit him? The other thing we have to talk about is a lot of these players in these areas, as we know, the Philadelphia public school system is not even funny anymore how awful it is. But you have to live with these kids in such poverty that a lot of them say, I can't stay in Philadelphia. I have to leave home. So at one side of the coin, I understand why some of those kids, say, I got to leave Philadelphia. That's a tough sell. I get that. But, I mean, aside from, Nova having a good run the last several years in a row, Nova has nothing that really makes them that much better of a university than Temple. And Nova can clean up shop with recruits just because Jay Wright is able to say, we're only going to go to the tournament. We're going to win multiple games. Well, Coach Dunphy is able to say, we're probably going to go to the tournament and we're probably going to lose in the first round.
Oh, it's so frustrating too because there was that stretch there where they would be the number 5 seed and it was for a couple years in a row and they would lose to South Florida. Remember that South Florida game?
Yeah.
How bad that was? It was a couple times like this. That San Diego State game frustrated the hell out of me. They finally had a chance to potentially go to the Sweet 16, and then Fran Dunphy gets into his super ultra conservative mode where he just wants to wait for the shot clock to go down. He did that against Indiana as well. And these two teams went and beat the Owls at the end. So the Owls would control these games, and then they'd lose at the end because of Fran Dunphy.
Yeah. The one thing to be fair, college basketball is about players more than college football. College basketball players, they can win tournaments. I think of Kimball Walker. When Kimball Walker was at UConn, he won that tournament on his shoulders. Obviously, Melo won his when he was at Syracuse as well. And I bring this up. Yeah, and I bring this up because when you look at some of the teams, in fairness to Coach Dunphy, the teams that they've lost to guys like Kawhi Leonard at San Diego State, Victor Oladipo at Indiana. I just lost the other one. James Harden at Arizona State. I mean, we just named 3 All-Stars in the NBA, right there. So they are losing to good teams, but at the same time, it's like, look, the product of Temple basketball is going down the last 3 years in a row, and now it's fair to start to say it might be time to move on.
I've been a Temple fan before I even went to Temple. So I was a fan when John Chaney was there, and I always found it remarkable how he could take an 11 seed and go to the Elite Eight.
Yeah.
He would do this. And then you have Fran Dunphy, who you basically can't even win a tournament game. But, I mean, maybe I'm being tough on him. I don't know. But I just, remember from the John Chaney days. And I remember back it was maybe 1999 they got to the Elite Eight against Michigan State, or maybe it was Duke. 2001 they made a run to the Elite Eight as well, I believe, before they lost to – I think that was the Michigan State year because they won it all. So John Chaney was able to get the job done with lesser talent in some ways, and Fran Dunphy just not being able to get the job done.
Yeah, he's very much someone asked me how would I describe the differences between those two coaches, and I said, when you had Coach Chaney, he was a firecracker. Like, you knew –
They practiced at 6 a.m. in the morning.
Oh, yeah. And there was no doubt. I'm sure there were players who probably wanted to kill him as their coach, but there probably also were players who'd run a brick wall for him, for that exact same reason. Coach Dunphy, I would describe him as a ham sandwich, just bland. But, hey, you're like, hey, it's a ham sandwich. All right, it's not bad, but it's just very bland. It's nothing to get excited with, and unfortunately, it's also very forgettable. And I think about, programs like VCU on that run they went on for those several years. In my head, when they were happening, I was like, how is VCU able to do this but Temple can't? And maybe that's just me being the jealous alumnist, but I looked at that and I was like, there's no reason that these type of programs or Wichita State should be able to do this but Temple can't.
Yeah, and Wichita State plays actually somewhat similar style to what the Owls do, just a defensive grind for 40 minutes. And that's what Temple has always been. But, I don't know. They seem to not be able to get the NBA talent lately because Chaney had it. Even though some of the guys didn't really work out. I think of Marty Collins, for example. He went to the Knicks. Deontay Christmas was with Dunphy, or was that Chaney?
No, Dumpf had him, just like Dumpf had Khalif. I mean, those are all guys who kind of, had their moments in the league. I guess you'd probably say the best NBA player Dunphy had was Lavoy Allen.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. It is Lavoy Allen.
But anyway,
I went to high school with Lavoy Allen.
That's right, you did.
I did. Pennsbury.
Well, let's move on here, from the basketball talk. And I want to talk about, we have a Temple alum in the news this past week, Adrian, and not for the good reasons. So Robbie Anderson coming out of Temple, everyone knew this guy was electric, and he went to the Jets, and he absolutely became a stud. And the Jets won a lot of games, to be fair, because Robbie Anderson was able to take the top off the defense.
Is it okay to say that I thought Robbie Anderson would be a good NFL player?
I'm not surprised, honestly. And when you look at the stack of receivers Temple's had from Rod Streeter all the way to Isaiah Wright in next year, Temple's secretly pretty deep at receiver.
That's fair. That's true. That's a good point. And Robbie Anderson just always caught my eye for some reason. It is the deep ball. He does track that really well. He
tracks it, explosive. I mean, he was that dude on the Jets that made their offense somewhat legitimate, and it was a large reason that they actually were able to win more games than they really should have.
Yeah.
But Robbie Anderson was arrested for the second time in 8 months.
Yeah.
Robbie Anderson arrested on nine charges. Everything from running a red light, okay, not a big deal, to saying he was going to sexually assault the officer's wife. Kind of a big deal.
Yeah. Don't be saying that.
Nope.
Good.
Especially when the officer pulled you over for doing 105 and a 45.
Oh, Robbie. I love you, Robbie, but Robbie.
I got to ask, second time in 8 months, is his career over in the NFL?
It's interesting because the Jets don't have a lot of talent at wide receiver.
Yep.
I don't know. It's going to be up to Robbie, honestly, and showing change, and he's going to have to prove it to them, I think. But I think they'll give him another shot.
It's tough, because we live in this era now of anytime you do something, you're instantly everywhere.
Yeah, it's not like 10 years ago.
No, where you can cover this stuff up. In fairness to exactly what you said, Adrian, this is not a great Jets roster. So a player like Robbie probably gets a little more leeway than, say, if he was on a loaded team. I could see the Jets cutting him. I mean, I could see the Jets saying, look, 2 arrests in 8 months, it's hard for us to, trust you again. There were rumors of off-the-field concerns for him coming out of college. I could see them moving on. The really tough thing for him is the Tennessee Titans used to have the receivers coach from Temple. So Temple's receivers coach, the name is escaping me at the moment, used to be the wide receivers coach for the Tennessee Titans. Problem with that is normally I would say, oh, well, if your college receivers coach like you and you got released by the Titans, hey, maybe you have someone who's going to pound the table and you can get signed in Tennessee. Problem is Mike Vrabel just cleared staff there in Tennessee. So, his own ally in the NFL might be gone. So, unfortunately, if I'm putting money down, I think Robbie Anderson is not on the Jets roster at the start of the year at this rate.
How many times was Michael Floyd arrested? Because didn't he get released?
He was, and he's on the Vikings now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he did get a second shot, but he hasn't done anything since he was in Arizona. He was pretty solid for Arizona. He was that third complement to John Brown, Larry Fitzgerald.
Yeah.
But ever since that incident and he's been released, he hasn't done anything. I'm trying to think of other examples. I mean, obviously Josh Gordon got arrested multiple times, so that's not really fair to kind of judge that.
Justin Blackmon was another one in that same situation. Yeah.
Justin Blackmon seemed a lot worse too, though.
I mean, the one thing we have to kind of just be fair about, Michael Floyd was alcohol situations. He went into rehab. Josh Gordon was marijuana situations. He went into rehab. Blackmon went into rehab but never really took it seriously, and his time was over in the league.
Yeah.
Robbie Anderson's big situation now is the fact that he said he was going to sexually assault a police officer.
Yeah, that's the problem with this. Yeah.
Not that I'm trying to say, drinking and driving is fine as long as you don't say you're going to screw the officer's wife. You can't do that, dude. I mean, it's unbelievable, and it's unfortunate because, as I was just talking about, we could have gotten to the point in 2 to 3 years, Adrian, where there could have been 5 receivers in the NFL that were Temple alum, and now I'm wondering if Robbie Anderson is even in the NFL next season.
Yeah, he is talented though, but it's gonna be more about Robbie Anderson than a team giving him a chance. He's gonna have to show teams that he's serious about this, and he's gonna go to rehab and get himself fixed up. So I think it's more about that than a team giving him a chance. He has to prove it.
Yep. All right. Well, that wraps up all of our Temple talk today, guys. As we normally do one kind of weird story of the day to kind of wrap things up and leave us all shaking our heads and thinking what's going on in America here. So here's one that is not so weird, and it's an age-old conversation, but it's news to all of us again. Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens not elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame. Adrian, and you're a sport nut, dude. Are you okay with Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens not being in the Hall of Fame?
Oh, man. Here's the thing. There was so much steroids in that era that it's like, to me, because there was so much of it, I'm going to put Barry Bonds in the Hall of Fame. I also think pre-steroid Barry Bonds did enough to make the Hall of Fame as well. When you think of what he did with the Pirates and the, kind of the beginning years with the Giants, he should be in the Hall of Fame. Roger Clemens should be in the Hall of Fame. The Hall of Fame is going to get diluted if they don't want to put these guys in. That's the way I see it.
I'm 1,000% with you. Now, as I've talked about in other shows that we've done, Adrian, I've never been the biggest baseball fan. So to me, I'm cool if these guys want to juice up and hit 700-foot home runs and throw 200-mile-an-hour fastballs. I'm cool with that. I am all for that because it makes it exciting to me. But you're 100% right, Adrian. Like the value of the Baseball Hall of Fame is going to be so boring now because it's like, hey, if you played after 1995, you probably are on steroids, so you don't get in.
I saw Jason Isringhausen on the Hall of Fame ballot.
Yeah.
That's a joke to me.
Yeah.
Mark McGwire is off of it, but Jason Isringhausen is on it.
Right.
Come on.
Right.
Do you even know who Jason Isringhausen is?
No, I'm not a baseball fan, and that tells me how bad it is, dude.
He's not good. He wasn't that good.
I mean, like I said, you said it best. You're diluting. I think the answer is obvious. I think what you do is if you really have that many tight-ass baseball people who have this much issues with it, then what you do is you make a separate wing. You make a separate wing and you say, okay, this is the modern baseball, and then you actually say, all right, let's see who the best players were. Because there's no doubt that Barry Bonds is in there. He might have been the most dominant athlete ever during that spread here. And I'm including guys like Kobe and LeBron and even Brady. I mean, when Barry Bonds was in his prime, he completely changed baseball.
Yeah, we're talking 40 home runs, 40 stolen bases here.
Absolutely. And then, he was one of the few guys who not only led the league in home runs, but also led the league in intentional walks, like annually, because teams were just like, nope, not even gonna do it.
And that's what makes his statistics even that more impressive is, he's still hitting the ball even though pitchers don't even want to pitch to him. He gets that one pitch per at bat, and he laces it for a base hit or a home run or wherever he wants to put the ball.
Absolutely. Well, that wraps up our show here, guys. Appreciate you guys listening to Temple University's, kind of a quick summary about football and basketball, and also our little quick Barry Bonds conversation. Adrian, closing words. You got anything, buddy?
I got nothing else. All I got is go Owls, and it's going to be a long rest of the season here. 10-10 basketball team, not good.
Yeah, no question. But, hey, in the meantime, fight for the cherry and the white. Appreciate it, guys.